Hello, my name is Justin Urquhart Stewart, and for those who've been on this before, welcome back. For those who haven't, you're very welcome to be here in the first place. So this week, what to talk about? Well, I think it's probably worth talking about China for a while, isn't it? We do have enough headlines on it. I feel we're starting into a new era, a Chinese Cold War, or almost. And it's very easy to be taken in by the hyperbole of the headlines and all the current news, which is actually there to try and frighten us all, obviously. But we need to give it some context here as to what's going on and how China's behaving and why, and therefore as investors, what we need to be able to do. Well, first of all, we've had the obvious things, such as the trade war, such as it's been, although we've got a phase one agreement between America and China. We've got the Chinese now saying, and of course Trump saying as well, that actually they may not actually go through with the first phase of it, whether that happens or not. But that's only one part of it. You've got Australia complaining about potentially an 80% tariff on their barley going to China. And also issues, of course, relating to commodity exports from Australia to China. And that's almost the sort of the opium that actually Australia lives on. It is very dependent upon not producing rather dodgy beer or actually quite good wine, but actually producing rock-hard rocks that it sends off to China. Then, of course, you've got all the other issues relating to geopolitical elements in the South China Sea, with these Paracel Islands, amongst others, where they managed to upset Vietnam, Brunei, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines all at once, which is really quite clever. India, we've got disputes on the border with Assam in northeast, and with Kashmir. You thought that might have been a Pakistan-Indian problem. Apart from the fact that 30% of it's controlled by the Chinese. The direct translation is to look after it. And then, of course, you've got issues with Japan in the East China Sea over some rather dodgy rocks. But that's all about something much more important in the Orient, which is about face, pride. So China is beginning to assert itself more. You can see it certainly in terms of the lendings into places like Sri Lanka and Africa, low-cost lendings, which suddenly become high-cost lendings, which can no longer be repaid, and therefore the ownership reverts to the Chinese. So be wary here. But now let's give it some historical context. As far as Chinese is concerned, from 1839 to 1949, they call that the century of humiliation. I appreciate it's 110 years, but let's not be pedantic. Humiliation, why? Because all of the major powers, Japan, Germany, Austria-Hungary, even Belgium, Britain, America, France, were all nibbling at China in terms of colonies and concessions, which is another term for a baby colony, and therefore humiliated a very weak China. So it's a payback time for China now, as China now tries to reassert itself on the basis it is now a growing power, no longer a manufacturing-based economy, a service-based economy. Very different indeed. So what do we as investors now have to do about this? Well, the answer is now be really rather careful, because what used to be made in China may no longer be made in China. That does not mean we all make iPhones locally, but it may mean that actually the low-cost production that we were used to has already moved to Bangladesh, to other areas, Indonesia. It also means that we should be looking locally to other areas of business development as well. And that's where we need to try and find those businesses which are not going to be so dependent upon China. China is still going to be vital to the global economy. And the very fact that the first time ever the Chinese Communist Party has not set a target for growth is really very important. Because the Chinese Communists are there not so much tolerated, they obviously rule the place, but on the basis that what they say happens. And if they can't say what's going to happen, then people get really rather concerned and worried about that overall. And you only have to look at what's happening with regard to Hong Kong as well. I mean, apart from the extremely weak efforts, in fact, no efforts on behalf of the British Foreign Office to try and do anything about it at all. China is asserting its new strength, but put it into context as to why it's doing so. We still need China, but as investors, we need to make sure we invest without being dependent upon China. Look locally, look on those local trade lines, and find it that way. Something which is Chinese free for investment, but Chinese involved in the global economy. Good luck, stay safe, and look forward to speaking to you again soon. Goodbye.